you know what? There could be whole worlds that are invisible to us. And in those worlds, there could be organisms that are invisible to us. And these theories just keep popping up all the time. And for me, I just find it quite frustrating because they want to keep this theoretical, when in fact there's evidence appearing that this is true. Okay? And for me, I think we've just had an example of this. We have a very strange phenomena of a star that that on a periodic basis dims and then brightens up. And we've known this for hundreds of years, this phenomena. And they've just announced that they believe they've detected an object that is totally invisible, casting a shadow on this star. And I feel that we've had a little bit of evidence that there's possibility of completely dark worlds, of invisible worlds. We cannot see them with the telescope. Now, this is interesting because, again, there was a press release that I found on a website called Science Codex. I'd never even heard of this website. All the usual websites had no information on this. I don't know how I find it. I find things. I think I'm guided, quite frankly. But actually it says here every 27 years we get this phenomena of something casting a shadow over this star. And they think there's possibly some kind of evidence for another dark world existing. For me, the implications are immense. There are worlds that we can't see. Now I'm thinking, well, what about these invisible organisms then? You've got these dark worlds that we can't see. What about the dark organisms? Now, this little section, I've been talking about a shadow biosphere. I've been talking about the fact that our military are aware of the fact that there are a form of life that has been normally quite invisible that they could detect on radar, and is now becoming very apparent. I've spent the last day or so with some wonderful people, my hosts, and we've been talking about the fact that top business leaders have been told that they need to make sure they don't miss out. There's going to be a great business opportunity. They've got to jump on the bandwagon now with UFOs. Okay? So what's going on? I know this sounds absolutely crazy, but last week there was a meeting in Saudi where top business leaders were told, you better get yourselves organised, folks, because there's going to be a massive business opportunity with UFOs. What I want to say is that there has been a knowledge held by a very few people on this planet. And I'm not going to go on and on about this. It's going to be 10 minutes, absolutely max. But I just want to say that I've been trying to document where this knowledge is being held. Who is it that's had this knowledge? Who's understood that we're not alone? What were their reasons for hiding this information? Carl Sagan is a very well-known scientist. He was one of these people that sort of brought science to the masses. And he said, you know what, if a fourth dimensional creature existed, it could exist, and it could change its size, it can appear, it can dematerialize. And I'm thinking, do you know something that I don't know? You know, he said this back in 1980s. And this quote here is this most famous quote. Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. Did he know something at that point? This character, I don't expect you to read all this, but this is just some of the quotes that you can find on the internet. Sir Fred Hoyle is a Yorkshireman, and he's one of these people you know, is very straight guy. He's dead now, but he was actually knighted by the Queen for his services to science and astronomy. And he one day got fed up and organised a press release to talk and tell the press that we are not alone. Have you heard about this? Because I've never heard about it until recently. And he says, the only reason I've called this press release conference is that no government on earth would release this information. All governments fear panic amongst their people and think that if people knew the truth and knew some alien intelligent force and power is controlling them, then the people would no longer listen to or obey their government. There is a belief that the invisible world has been influencing and controlling this planet. I actually don't believe that. But a lot of people believe that there are powerful forces out there, and their only job is to keep us humans in check, or to use us as parasites or whatever, and, you know, be parasitical. I actually don't believe that. But there is a thread, there is a belief there amongst the elite, the people who know the truth. Okay, and I just want to point out this, I don't want to read all this, but he talks about alien minds controlling us and blah blah and how different they are and everything. I just want to point out, if you want to take notes, you can look this up yourself, that in 1971, Sir Fred Hoyle literally, and this actually was, you can find the quotes in this book, this is a well-known book, UFO book. And I was shocked because I actually had the book at home. So I looked it up and said, yes, I read this 10, 15 years ago. It made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever at that time. It makes a lot of sense to me now. The other thing I want to point out is that decades and decades ago, we've had so-called science fiction telling us about an invisible presence on this planet. This is a science fiction book. When I read it, I was quite impressed. I thought, oh, this is good. It's apparently fact fiction. And he says, you know what, this is just my way of conveying certain facts. This guy, Eric Frank Russell, was a sci-fi writer, Fortean researcher. He was also a military advisor and apparently arch foe of Aleister Crowley. I'm thinking, who or what was this guy? Was he an occultist? However, he understood there was another presence on this planet. And in 1939, his book was published as part of a magazine called Unknown. I read this and I thought, wow, this is really interesting. It's quite a nice little read, actually. But his description of these balls of light today makes a lot more sense. I just want you to be aware there are people that have known the truth for decades and it's been hidden. This one absolutely shocked me. Carl Jung, who was a very, very famous psychologist, and he basically risked his reputation by writing a book on flying saucers. And the reason he did this was he said that he'd come across Egyptian text warning of what was going to happen when we have massive change on this planet. When we change from one age, one zodiacal era or period to the next one, we always seem to have an appearance of something that we call UFOs. When we go from one astrological age to another astrological age, he said there is always an appearance of, well, basically, he didn't really like the idea of physical UFOs. He preferred to interpret UFOs as a sort of psychological phenomena, like a dream thing. even though he was being presented with evidence and photographs. There are interviews available on the internet where people spoke to Carl Jung and showed him the pictures. Remember, the elite have been aware of this for a long time, and there's information shared amongst a certain high level in society. For them, for these people, it's a reality. For the general public, it's all mocked, and it's all in the past. It's all being put down. It's your imagination. You're not really seeing these things. And people all over the planet are now speaking out. I can't go into all the information that I've been picking up. We've had the military going on record for the last 10 years or so, talking about the reality of UFOs. In 2010, the latest press conference was broadcast live by CNN. All of a sudden, the information is becoming much more public. I think it was CNN or Fox News, either way, I was amazed at the fact that they were prepared to broadcast this conference where these military men were talking about their experience of UFOs. In fact, the thing that makes me laugh is there was apparently on Turkish TV, there was a debate going on about UFOs, and apparently it got very heated. And apparently, as part of the TV program, a senior military official rang up and said, "I don't know what you're arguing about, UFOs are real." That's it. So there was a tremendous outpouring of people wanting to say this is true. It's like the level of consciousness on the planet is changing to such an extent that people don't want to lie anymore. They don't want to cover up anymore. They just want to say, look, this is happening. I'm particularly interested in the historical side of this. Who knew what, when, and why did they not say anything? Carl Jung did say something, and he said, you know what? He was totally convinced by these Egyptian texts. And I'm just going to skip through a few slides here. We know the Egyptians were interested in UFOs because we have the story of Alberto Tulli, who was basically a director of the Egyptian section of the Vatican Museum. He found a papyrus. He didn't want to pay the price. It was too expensive, and so he copied it. And it's actually now gone into the UFO literature, that information. So we know the Egyptians were interested in UFOs. It's not a recent phenomenon. It's something that's been going on for a very long time. This is a linear translation of this text. It is still considered to be controversial, but quite frankly, it's evidence that in the past, the Egyptians were quite aware of UFOs. So Carl Jung, I would love to know what it was that Carl Jung saw, because it's hidden from the public. I'd like to be interested in finding someone who knows what it was that Carl Jung read that disturbed him so much that he risked his reputation to write about UFOs. He said he felt obliged to do something and to say something, because we were going to start seeing these objects. And it's something that the Egyptians wrote about as a certainty, an absolute certainty, that these things were going to appear in our awareness. Okay, I'm just going to...
Have you noticed the last line there? Fish and birds fell down the sky.
Yes, I know. I didn't want to talk about it. It's happening. The fishes are dropping out the sky. The birds are dropping out the sky. It is happening. You know, it's happening. So this is just the actual translation, and I don't want to go into this because there's a lot to say, other things to say. Just to put, if you've not come across this, you may be interested in finding this for yourself. That's the only reason for putting this slide up. So you've got a name, and you've got. I just point out the fact that the Egyptians did talk about UFOs too. And so Carl Jung, there's no reason why somebody in his position would say the things he was saying and write a book unless there was something behind it, because he was in a very